Hello, welcome to This World. Vladimir Amelyan joins.
Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks very much for joining us on tonight's edition of Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Our cover story tonight is on the Russia-Ukraine war. Who is winning? There is still no clear answer to that big question. And as we assess the claims and counterclaims and get you the latest from on the ground, we focus on the developments over the last 24 hours specifically, as Russia accuses Ukraine of launching the biggest nighttime drone attack on Russian soil since the war started. We are asking, what really is Ukraine's strategy? The drone attacks continue to make headlines, but to what end? What really is Kiev trying to achieve with these drone strikes? And do they really change the course of the conflict? We explore that and more. Also on the show for you tonight, as Gabon is the latest to witness a coup, as the army cancels elections and seizes power, we join the dots and get you the bigger picture. UK Parliamentary Committee says Japan and South Korea should be invited to join AUKUS. What would the AUKUS expansion mean for Quad? We answer that for you. Meta claims China is behind the largest digital influence operation. We tell you more about this operation and which social media platforms these groups are actually using. How is India perceived around the world? We tell you how brand India is shining globally. Do you also believe that beauty lies in the eyes of the beer holder? We'd get you the truth about the beer goggles phenomenon. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle. These profound words were articulated by Sun Tzu in his 5th century treatise, The Art of War. And while these words may hold little significance for you and me, their gravity magnifies manyfold when cast upon the stage of the Russia-Ukraine war. You see, recently, Ukraine has intensified drone attacks deep within Russia. But these drone raids have failed to make any significant impact. And the thing is, no matter how many drones they fly deep within Russia, the reality on the ground remains the same. Russian invading forces hold large parts of Ukrainian territory. So the question we ask tonight is, what is Ukraine trying to achieve through these near daily drone raids? Is it a deflection tactic, or is there a strategy here to keep the gravy train of Western aid coming in? In fact, just today, the US promised military aid worth $250 million to Ukraine. And earlier today, Ukraine launched perhaps its biggest drone attacks on Russian soil since the war started. Russia reported that its air defenses thwarted multiple strikes overnight. Over half a dozen UAVs were shot down across at least 6 regions. The drone raid lasted over 4 hours, striking Russian military assets near Russia's borders with Estonia and Latvia. The drones caused a huge blaze, damaging 4 Russian military transport planes. And there were no reports of casualties. And while Ukraine stayed mum in the aftermath, Moscow described it as a terrorist attack by Ukraine. And here we should be noting that while Ukraine has intensified the drone attacks on Russia, in most cases, these drones have been shot down by Russia's superior air defense systems, and some of them that passed through have only inflicted minor damage to Russian infrastructure. It is part of Ukraine's counteroffensive operations, a campaign aimed at reclaiming land lost to Russia. But reports from the battleground paint a rather grim reality of Ukraine's operations. You see, Ukraine has intensified the drone attacks, and yet they are also trying to send out a message. It seems a signal to the people in Russia, warning the Russian people that they too can be affected by the ongoing conflict. And this comes at a time when hundreds of tanks and other weaponry generously has been gifted to the Ukrainian troops, failed to alter Ukraine's fate. Russian troops have shot, burnt, destroyed NATO-supplied tanks and vehicles, and Ukrainian troops have failed to break through Russian defenses. In fact, according to Russia, Ukraine has lost more than 43,000 service members and nearly 5,000 pieces of military equipment since the start of the counteroffensive. Ukraine's counteroffensive is yet to yield impressive results, and Kiev blames delays in arms deliveries from the West. This is despite the US military sending over $43 billion in aid since the war started, and despite substantial support from Western sponsors. At this pace, for how long really can Western countries actually continue supporting Ukraine in light of Ukraine's unending appetite for aid and NATO's dwindling stockpile? Is NATO's Ukraine aid policy sustainable? And as you think over that, let's also examine what the American taxpayer actually thinks. Consider this. According to a new poll by CNN, 55% of people stated that the US should not authorize more funds for Ukraine, while 45% said the Congress should authorize such funding. 51% expressed that the US has already done enough. 48% believe that it should do more. The poll was conducted from the 1st of July to the 31st this year, and the results were released earlier this month. Partisan divisions have also widened, according to CNN. Most Democrats and Republicans are now on opposing sides regarding America's role in Ukraine. And a majority of Americans, about 56%, are concerned that Russia's war in Ukraine will threaten US national security. And a bigger worry across partisan lines is this: the war will continue without a resolution for a long time. And yet, Ukraine does not fear a fall in Western war assistance. Its foreign minister, in fact, has dismissed the poll. Dmytro Kuleba told reporters on Tuesday, and I'm quoting, "We are not feeling any fall in support from the US Congress in the European Parliament. In the US, it's linked to the start of the electoral cycle." He said that Ukraine would overcome it, quote unquote. In reality, Russia has intensified its strikes on Ukraine's energy and military infrastructure. And for Russia, this war is not merely about acquiring territories. It's a more nuanced objective than that. After all, at its very core, Putin's primary aim is to keep Ukraine out of NATO at any cost. The bottom line is this: Ukraine has resorted to drone strikes with the hope of inflicting a psychological impact. It's meant to support the slow counteroffensive. However, Western experts don't see Ukraine winning the war. On the battlefield, at least, the land battle has been frozen for some time. Ukrainians are moving, of course. They have made gains, but few want to actually admit that it has reached a stalemate. But a stalemate is what it will turn into, some say. The West is realizing that the current model is not sustainable. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky pledged to bring the war into Russia, and he has delivered. However, he has also entrapped himself in a catch-22. For over a year, Ukraine has requested sophisticated weaponry, and in exchange, Zelensky vowed to remove Russia. Yet, these promises are struggling, and NATO is feeling fatigued. Will Zelensky's quest for victory lead to Ukraine's victory, or will it plunge his people deeper into conflict? We have to wait and watch. It's happened yet again. Another country in Africa has plunged into unrest. This time it's Gabon. The country's military officers have announced that they have seized power, and this unfolded on live television. This is the second coup in Africa this year, and less than a month since Niger. Also, the 8th since 2020 within the Sahel region. The question is, what does this mean for Africa? What does this mean for Sahel's stability and Africa's democracy? Let's take a closer look. Let's start off with the latest. On Wednesday, a group of uniformed Gabonese soldiers appeared on national television. They announced the dissolution of all institutions of the Republic and the cancellation of the country's elections. But just have a look at the timing. It happened just minutes after President Ali Bongo was declared to have won a third term. The military leaders placed Bongo under house arrest and arrested one of his sons for treason. What was the motive? Coup soldiers say they want to, quote-unquote, defend peace by putting an end to the current regime. They, in fact, denounced what they called Bongo's irresponsible, unpredictable governance, adding that Bongo's 14 years in office resulted in, quote-unquote, deterioration in social cohesion. And soon after the address, journalists reported sounds of gunfire in Gabon's capital. It's unclear whether there were clashes. But we can confirm for you there were celebrations, and we have the visuals for you. Have a look. In fact, the rebellion comes amid multiple coups and rising anti-French sentiment in France's former colonies. In late July, there was a coup in another French colony, Niger. It started with the members of Niger's presidential guard detaining the president, Mohamed Bazoum, inside his palace. And they also appeared on national television saying that they were seizing power. And the motive was the same, ending, quote-unquote, the deteriorating security situation and bad governance. And days later, the junta declared the head of the presidential guard, Abdurrahman Etiani, as the new head of state. And questions naturally followed, mostly about the security of the region. Niger has been a key ally of Western powers. The main West African bloc, AUKUS, has been trying to negotiate with the coup leaders. AUKUS claims they are ready to send troops into Niger. What for? To restore constitutional order if diplomacy fails. Now, Niger has authorized Mali and Burkina Faso's forces to intervene in case of an attack. Burkina Faso has seen a coup. In January 2022, Burkina Faso's army ousted the president, Roch Kabore. They blamed him for failing to contain violence by Islamist militants. The coup leader, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Damibia, pledged to restore security, but attacks worsened, eroding morale in the forces. That led to a second coup in September 2022. And at this point, the current junta leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, seized power. And the story repeats itself in neighboring Mali. In 2020, military officers took control. In 2022, another officer overthrew his former friends. And then in Chad, the killing of the president, Idriss Déby, in 2021 in clashes with rebels also led to instability. In fact, it has seen clashes with forces linked to eastern Libya's Khalifa Haftar. And there was a coup in Guinea in 2021. Collectively, the past few years have witnessed a persistent trend of coups in Africa. And this ongoing pattern is in part a legacy of the instability following the independence from colonial rule. In 2021, 5 countries experienced military takeovers, and this troublesome trend continued into 2022 with 5 attempts, including 2 in Burkina Faso alone. Popular uprisings against dictatorial regimes have opened the door for the resurgence of coups across Africa. But the ultimate outcome of such uprisings can often be shadowed by the actions of military leaders leading the coups. And interestingly, Africa accounts for the lion's share of the coup instances around the world, with 18 since 2017. With the exception of Myanmar, all of them occurred on African soil. The question still remains, is the continent seeing a new wave of democracy threats? On to another question. What would an AUKUS expansion mean for Quad? Just last week, we witnessed the expansion of BRICS, the inclusion of more states into the bloc, and a week on, another bloc is deliberating a proposed expansion. I'm talking about AUKUS, an acronym for Australia, United Kingdom, and the United States. This is essentially a trilateral security pact formed in September 2021 with the aim of countering China in the Indo-Pacific region. And a group in the UK now says that the AUKUS should have more members. The group in question is an influential UK House of Commons committee. It says that the AUKUS should ask countries like Japan and South Korea to join the pact. The committee says that the proposed expansion would likely focus on activities such as cyber, space, AI, quantum, undersea technologies. Let me just quote the committee's exact suggestion. The UK government should propose to Australia and the United States that Japan and South Korea be invited to join an AUKUS technological defense cooperation agreement. There is a cyber and advanced technology sharing and joint development component that could be equally, if not more, significant. And interestingly enough, this report's release coincides with the British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly's trip to China. That's right, he's currently in China to challenge Chinese officials in Beijing. Challenge them over what, you ask? Over their growing military support for Russia. So the timing of this very suggestion is interesting. The question is, what will this expansion mean for the Quad? I mean, Australia is already part of the Quad. Now, if the AUKUS was to include Japan as well, the bloc will end up looking more or less like the Quad itself. And this assertion is not entirely off the mark. You see, the committee, which released this report, also suggested UK's inclusion into the Quad. But it said that some thought it was too early for the UK to do so. And others said that they were against the proposal altogether. So was this an attempt to downplay the relevance of the Quad? Who knows? And it does not even end there. The AUKUS is not the first alliance against China in the Indo-Pacific. We already have the Five Eyes and the ANZUs. How many more similar alliances do we really need? Is the region becoming too crowded with too many alliances and too many objectives? It helps to look at them differently. The Five Eyes is about intelligence sharing. The ANZUs is too narrow. And the Quad was never really a military alliance. It focused on global commons, trade, climate change, and recently COVID-19 as well. So even if the AUKUS were to expand, it could give the Quad some breathing room. The Quad has no pressure to become the Asian NATO or to build a fleet against China. AUKUS is doing that. It's building a fleet of submarines, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and long-range anti-ship missiles. And the Quad could instead dismantle China's economic dominance through new supply chains and trade deals. My point is simple. The Quad and AUKUS can complement each other without impacting how both the blocs function. Quad can maintain its broad agenda like climate change, technology, scientific expertise. It has no immediate responsibility to step up and commit to an explicitly anti-China security framework. And this meshes rather well with India's outlook. Do you believe everything that you see on social media? Well, I really hope you do not. It's not just about influencers selling a made-up life. It's also about propaganda, about influencing narratives. Social media platforms have, after all, become a weapon in arsenal. And China is making the most of it. Beijing has been trying to target its critics online, and it's also promoting its talking points, all via Facebook and Instagram. Meta has uncovered China's covert digital influence operation. Our next report telling you all about it.
Be careful of what you see on social media. It could be Chinese propaganda in disguise. What makes us say that? This report by Meta. It has uncovered one of China's secret operations. Not just any operation, but what Meta says is the largest covert influence operation that's currently active in the world. So, what exactly has China been doing? It has been spewing propaganda. It has been trying to discredit the West and promote Beijing's agenda. How so? Through more than 50 social media and online platforms. This includes Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, Reddit, Quora, Pinterest, Medium, and Blogspot, among others. So, what is China's agenda? Meta says to promote its talking points, slam the West, and target Beijing's critics. According to Meta's report, Chinese agents racked up more than 550,000 followers on Facebook. These accounts bashed the US over its support for Taiwan. They also spread lies about Washington's alleged role in causing the COVID-19 pandemic. So just how big was China's operation? Let me tell you. The China-based teams pumped out pro-Beijing propaganda across almost 8,000 Facebook accounts and 15 Instagram accounts. They also circulated YouTube videos, Quora responses, and even fake comments on a forum for Luxemburger Wort, a Luxembourg newspaper. The tricksters pretended they were located across the Western world, but Meta claims they were working out of China. It also says they had ties with Chinese law enforcement, but despite the sophisticated tactics, the campaign's impact was negligible at best. The China-based group made rookie mistakes. They posted a Mandarin social media post under an English-language headline. And vice versa. Others misstated dates. For instance, regarding when Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the US House of Representatives, had traveled to Taiwan. Even more made outlandish statements, such as the United Nations had voted against the US in a recent resolution. Now, social media users may be impressionable, but they are not fools. Many digital users mocked these influence peddlers over the misinformation they were spreading. The campaign had been going on for well over a year. This isn't the first time China has attempted something like this. Only weeks ago, we told you about Neville Roy Singham. A New York Times investigation had accused him of spending millions of dollars in India to spread pro-China propaganda. Singham reportedly poured money into a website called NewsClick, which, according to the New York Times, sprinkled its coverage with Chinese government talking points. You see, this is how desperate China is to influence your views towards it, so be careful of what you see on social media. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Our next story is from India, and it should interest every Indian. Have you ever wondered what the rest of the world thinks about India? How they perceive Indians, their politics, and their way of life? Well, a new survey has offered some interesting answers. It's been conducted by the Pew Research Center, a think tank based in Washington. It surveyed a total of 30,861 people in at least 24 countries. And these are the findings. To start with, the survey states that people in most G20 nations have a favourable view of India. A median of 46% of adults hold a favourable opinion of India, while a median of 34% have a negative opinion. And which countries have the best opinion on India? Well, there's Israel. 71% of Israelis, in fact, say they have a favourable view of India. 20% don't, and 9% don't have an opinion. Besides Israel, India is also seen favourably in Kenya, Nigeria, the United Kingdom. In all of these parts, at least 6 in 10 people saying that they have a favourable view of the country. In North America, people of Canada, the US, Mexico have a favourable opinion of India. In Europe, people of 10 countries, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, the Netherlands, Poland, Spain, Sweden, these countries have a favourable view of India. Political ideology also plays an important role in how India is evaluated in some cases. In Hungary, Australia and Israel, those on the political right have a more favourable view of India than those on the left. And in the United States, the opposite is true. That's right. In America, liberals are more likely than conservatives to hold a favourable opinion of India. The survey also recorded the opinion of people in India towards the US, Russia and China. And among these 3 countries, the US has the highest positive image among Indians, followed by Russia. However, Indians see China as unfavourable. According to the survey, the percentage of Indians who hold a favourable opinion of the US, Russia and China standing at 65%, 57% and 26% respectively. The people surveyed were also asked about India's influence globally, and at least 68% Indians see it as growing. And when broken down, according to party loyalties, 77% of those who support the ruling alliance see this to be the case, while 60% of those who don't identify with ruling parties agree that India's influence has risen. And what do these responses really tell you? That overall, India is viewed positively around the world, that people in most countries have a fairly favourable opinion of India, its people and its politics. The timing of the survey is significant. It comes less than 2 weeks before Prime Minister Modi is set to host leaders of the G20 nations in New Delhi for a summit. US President Joe Biden has confirmed his attendance at the summit. And besides him, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, Chinese President Xi Jinping, the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, the French President, they will all be present at that summit. So at a time like this survey comes as a major boost for brand India. The reactions may be mixed, but they still indicate that India is talked about in a positive manner and how brand India is shining around the world. Advertisements often lie to us. They sell an idea to us. The idea of a product that's often very different from the reality of that very product. Take, for example, burger chains. like Burger King. The billboards show meaty patties. The menu promises the perfect pair of toasted buns. But is that really what you get? Burger King is now facing a lawsuit in the US. It's been accused of making its Whopper look larger in the menu. At least 35% larger. The lawsuit basically highlights two things. One, Burger King's menu makes the patty look meatier than it really is. That's the allegation. And number two, the buns are shown overflowing with the ingredients. But that, it says, is far from what is served to you. What you get is a small, sad-looking burger. The patty is half of what is promised to you, is what the allegation is. And soon, the realization seeps in that you've been tricked. A US district judge, Roy Altman, called this a breach of contract. But Burger King is not convinced. Referring to the lawsuit, the burger chain has said the plaintiff's claims are false. What about the ads? Burger King claims it's not required to make burgers look exactly like the picture. Moreover, it is pointing at technicalities, like the flame-grilled beef patties shown in the ads are the same served at its outlets. The question is, why then does the patty not look half as good or meaty? In 2010, one of its ads was banned in the UK. This was after the UK's Advertising Standards Authority found great disparity in what was promised and what was served. And to test this, the authorities bought 3 burgers. They found that the burger's thickness and height were quote-unquote considerably less than in the ad. Now, American chains, McDonald's, Wendy's also have been accused of unfair and deceptive trade practices. Last year, in fact, a lawsuit against the two giants said that they were advertising their burger 15% larger than they actually were. And here's what one of the customer complaints said. The ads are unfair and financially damaging consumers as they are receiving food that is much lower in value than what is being promised. Taco Bell was sued earlier this year, in fact, for falsely advertising its Mexican pizza. Customers said the product had half the amount of beef and bean filling as compared to the ad. The lawsuit, in fact, alleged, and I'm quoting, Taco Bell advertises large portions of food to steer consumers to their restaurants for their meals and away from competitors that more fairly advertise the size of their menu items. This, in fact, is an accusation a lot of food chains have been facing. And why just food chains? Your breakfast cereals look different on the product boxes. Yogurts, ice creams look a lot better in the ads. Nail paints have better finish. Shoes are shinier in the ads. Clothes brighter. Resorts cleaner. And you see, that's the thing about advertisements. They sell you dreams and a lot of hope. And what very often is different from the reality. What if I told you money can help you get away with anything? Would you believe me? Here's the story of Hisham Mustafa. He is an Egyptian billionaire. His criminal record is being erased. That's right. Let's tell you what this is all about. In the year 2010, Mustafa was sentenced to prison for 15 years. What for? Take a guess. Murder. The man killed his girlfriend. Her name was Suzanne Tamim. She was a Lebanese singer. Their story started in the year 2004. Suzanne was trying to divorce her then husband, and Mustafa helped her get the divorce. The two eventually started dating. Mustafa was already married. He wanted Suzanne to be his second wife. But Mustafa's mother opposed the marriage. The two broke up. That's what he claims. The real story appears to be very different. Suzanne had once said that Mustafa had proposed to her and she refused to marry him. The two parted ways. She moved to London and then Dubai. Mustafa, on the other hand, did not move on. The refusal left him with a sour taste. He hired a hitman in Dubai, paid him $2 million to kill Suzanne. And that hitman found Suzanne at a Dubai hotel and slit her throat. This happened in 2008. Suzanne was all of 30 years old. And what followed is a classic case of how the moneyed often used their power, their influence to escape the law. Hisham Mustafa is no ordinary man, by the way. He was an associate of former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak's son, Gamal, also a senior member of Egypt's National Democratic Party. Mustafa is a billionaire. Forbes ranks him 45th in its top 100 travel and tourism leaders. The man owns the Four Seasons hotels in Sharm el-Sheikh, Cairo, and Alexandria. That is how moneyed he is. The murder case gripped the country. There were protests across West Asia. In fact, the UAE wanted to try him, but Egypt refused to extradite Mustafa. In 2009, an Egyptian court sentenced Mustafa to death. This conviction was quashed within a year. There was a retrial, and the billionaire was handed 15 years in jail. And the same year, the hitman, Egyptian police officer Mohsen al-Sokari, was sentenced to 25 years in jail. In the year 2020, al-Sokari was granted clemency by the Egyptian president. Mustafa walked out of prison way before that. He was granted a presidential pardon on health grounds in the year 2017. And now, a Cairo criminal court has granted his request for name clearing. What is name clearing, you ask? It is when a person's name is cleared from public records. Basically, a clean slate. Mustafa could afford to buy this clean slate. His money and influence ensured that he got away with murder. TikTok is back with another bizarre, also dangerous trend. It's called the egg crack challenge. What comes to your mind? Cracking an egg in a weird way while making breakfast? Breaking an egg with something bizarre, perhaps? Well, users are literally cracking eggs on toddlers' heads. Some videos show babies crying after their parent hits them with an egg. Medical experts have denounced this trend, but why is this trend targeting toddlers? Why is it making headlines? Our next report getting you the complete story.
Here.
Will you believe us if we say these are parents hitting innocent toddlers on the head with hard eggshells? The parents are seen laughing away as their child is in shock. Eggs are not soft and fluffy toys. They are not made of cotton. But a new TikTok trend called the Egg Crack Challenge has convinced parents to videotape themselves while they hit their child with an egg. Parents keep their child in the video frame as they cook and unsuspectingly hit their child on the head with an egg. The parents enjoy seeing their child's reaction. In most incidents, the toddler is confused, and in many instances, children start crying. Some may see this as fun and all in good spirit, but critics are calling this child abuse. This is what some social media users have to say. When I see those videos, I think, are we that bored as parents and desperate for content? That dumb #EggCrack challenge is child abuse. Seriously, possibly give your kid an internal head bleed or whatever. Just stop that. It's not funny if you cause your child hurt and distress for social media likes and views. Medical experts are warning that if a child ingests the raw egg, it could put them at risk of salmonella. What is salmonella? It's a bacterial disease that affects the intestinal tract and is often caused by eating raw eggs or egg products. Salmonella has painful symptoms, which include diarrhea, stomach cramps, fever, nausea, vomiting, and headache. But why are parents willing to take such a risk? Are they chasing the likes, views, and shares? Sadly, the answer is yes. Taking part in a trend gives users a dopamine hit, also called the happy hormone. Some experts are comparing TikTok to crack cocaine, similar to drugs. TikTokers want to keep indulging in new trends, no matter how absurd or harmful the trends get. Users will take part and enjoy the high they get from the likes and views. This is not the first time a TikTok trend has targeted toddlers. In 2019, TikTokers started throwing cheese slices at babies' faces. This was the Cheese Challenge. Experts said that parents should first and foremost treat their children with care. Throwing cheese at helpless babies can, in some cases, shock them and lead to unnecessary discomfort. Is that really worth a few social media likes? Babies don't even know what a trend is. Why are TikTok trends subjecting them to such bizarre acts? Is social media blinding users of the fact that these children will learn from us? What they see, they will potentially do in the future. Do we really want to see our upcoming generation take part in such trends? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Have you ever taken antibiotics? Chances are you have. After all, antibiotics are a crucial part of modern medicine. But what if they have the potential to do more damage than good to our bodies? Antibiotics are programmed to target infection-causing bacteria, but studies show that they also wipe out healthy bacteria. And scientists are concerned over the damage to the gut microbiomes and the growing bacterial resistance towards antibiotics. So should doctors stop prescribing antibiotics? And will scientists change the way antibiotics are made? Let's get down to the basics. What are antibiotics? They are a type of medicine used to treat bacterial infections. Antibiotics either stop bacteria from spreading or kill them, but they don't often work on viral infections like colds, flu. Although antibiotics are good for killing infection-causing bacteria, they also wipe out the other bacteria in our bodies. We are talking about good bacteria. What do we mean by good bacteria? You see, there are healthy bacteria in our gut, which basically help us digest our food. Bacteria also present in our skin, breaking down lipids to produce a natural moisturizing factor. Good bacteria provide colonization resistance against pathogens. And scientists call them the greatest protection against harmful microbes. The disappointing part, though, is that antibiotics work against them, and the greatest affected being the gut microbiomes. Let me explain this. The gut microbiome, also called the gut bacteria, maintaining our health by regulating the immune system and also aiding digestion. Doctors call this a complex network of microbiotic life forms and say that antibiotics are one of the biggest threats to gut microbiomes. Antibiotic drugs not only kill the gut bacteria, they also transfer the bacteria's resistant genes to pathogens. And experts say, and I'm quoting, antibiotics disrupt the intricate ecosystem of our gut microbiome, and in doing so, put the surviving bacteria at greater risk of donating their resistant genes over to pathogens. You see, when a bacteria lacks the resistance genes, it dies off when it comes in contact with an antibiotic. But if the bacteria is resistant to antibiotics, it will survive. And this factor drives pathogenic bacteria to basically take out the resistance ability from good bacteria. So why do antibiotics damage the good bacteria? The answer lies in their formulation. Antibiotic drugs cannot differentiate between pathogenic bacteria and healthy bacteria. Basically, they go after all types of bacteria. And experts have explained this with an example. They say, and I'm quoting, think of a forest where you are trying to get rid of one weed infection. The way we deploy antibiotics is to carpet bomb the forest, killing the good and the bad. And while the effects can differ from person to person, scientists say that the damage done by one course of antibiotics can be permanent. And once a microbiome's ecology is changed, it does not return to the same state after an antibiotic dose. Although scientists are now trying to create antibiotics which will target specific pathogens, experts say that the biggest tool to staying safe is our diet. Nutrition plays a very important role when it comes to establishing the human microbiome. Researchers have created an equation between food and microbes. They say, and I'm quoting, the highest variety of foods we eat is usually associated with a higher variety of microbes in the gut, and fiber in particular seems to have a really positive impact. And the irony of the situation is that with each antibiotic course that we take, we potentially lower our body's ability to fight the infection. So the easy solution is to eat healthy and reduce our reliance on antibiotics. If you thought beauty was in the eyes of the beer holder, you might want to rethink that. For 50 years, the concept of beer goggles has been considered an actual phenomenon. But now scientists have poured cold water on its existence. And for those who don't know about it, let me tell you what it's all about. Beer goggles basically is the idea that alcohol makes other people appear better looking, which means if you have had a drink or two, you could feel attracted to people you won't otherwise find appealing had you been sober. And some North American university students came up with this term in the 1980s, and since then there had been anecdotal evidence of its existence. You may have noticed this around you as well, at parties or at get-togethers, at clubs, marriages as well. Basically, wherever there is a bar counter and people are celebrating, people would consume alcohol, get overly friendly and sometimes intimate. And the next day, the entire thing would be blamed on alcohol, on the couple of extra beers that they had, perhaps. But let me tell you, it was never the beer. It was always the person. Because if this new study is to be believed, beer goggles do not exist. So what are you actually wearing after getting drunk? Probably confidence. During this study, researchers basically asked 18 pairs of male friends to rate photographs of women and men based on their attractiveness. And the participants were called in pairs to mimic real-life social interactions, essentially to give them an impression that they were actually partying. And on one occasion, the pair was given vodka and cranberry juice. And on another, they got a non-alcoholic beverage. And once they had provided the attractive ratings, they were asked to select the person they would want to interact with in the future. Surprisingly, the study found that the alcohol did not affect the men's perception of attractiveness. Their sober and drunk ratings were more or less similar. But what it found was that men were more likely to interact with people they found attractive after consuming alcohol. You see, after getting drunk, participants were 1.71 times more interested in talking to those they found attractive. And while intoxication may not have resulted in beer goggles, it did seem to increase liquid courage. So the next time someone walks up to you drunk, know that it's not the alcohol talking. And tonight is a very special night for sky watchers around the world. On the 1st of August, people witnessed a magnificent supermoon, and tonight is the night of the super blue moon. The celestial event is basically an amalgamation of a supermoon and a blue moon, a rare phenomenon which takes place once in 10 years. So if you missed looking up at the sky tonight, you may have to wait more than a decade to see the next super blue moon. You may want to take a closer look at the moon. Scientists say that the super blue moon is 7% larger than the average full moon. And what's special about the event is also its rarity. You see, the moon orbits planet Earth in an elliptical path. And every month, the moon passes through the point closest to Earth and farthest from Earth. But rarely is the moon full while touching the closest and farthest points. And when this happens within a month, it's considered a blue moon. And let's just remind you here, we are in the blue moon month. But tonight, the moon will be coming closest to Earth while also being full. And that is known as a super moon. And that is why the moon you will see tonight is called a super blue moon. A combination of two major celestial events. And you do not want to miss looking up at the sky tonight, as scientists predict the next occurrence will be taking place in 2037.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world.